This right here is one of the most startling things that I came across. It's one of those things where it's like, how on earth is this a thing? I couldn't imagine that because, okay, now listen, I'm going to go into a little bit of a self-serving rant here, so feel free to skip ahead if you'd like to just get to the gist of the article. But what exactly is an internal monologue? Well, it's that voice in your head that you use to discuss important topics. And I couldn't imagine that there are people out there that lack that ability, that don't have that don't form their thoughts in their head, okay, and that they don't just, contemplate some of life's most difficult problems before they vocalize them, okay? But the more that you think about it, the more that it really does make sense. Like, why is Twitter so popular? Why do people have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of tweets if they aren't just constantly having to go through their thoughts in a digitally verbal, okay, format at all times? That's why so many people are so susceptible to so many just big movements, because, hey, they seem to have answered a question that I have. It's like, okay, cool. Because I can't properly formulate my own response to it, I'll just join up with the group. If I think social media should be burnt to the ground, it's because, okay, short question to this. Does everybody have an internal monologue? No. Is it more people than not have an internal monologue? It's a shocking amount of people. Let's get into this. Have you ever heard yourself talk in your head? If you have, then you've experienced a common phenomenon called an internal monologue. Look at the way that this is framed. It's like, hey, there's weird people that hear voices in their heads. Well, actually, it's just them kind of batting around different ideas, but okay. Also referred to as internal dialogue, the voice inside your head, or an inner voice. Your internal monologue is a result of certain brain mechanisms that cause you to hear yourself talk in your head without actually speaking and forming sounds. While an internal monologue is a common occurrence, not everyone experiences it. There's a lot of research that is yet to uncover about why some people frequently hear an inner voice and what that means. If I'm to just formulate an idea of this, and again, I've been thinking about this for a long time as well, but it's one of those things where whenever I'm out for a run in the morning, and I run every single morning and I can't stop it because it's where I do my best thinking, because it's just me. It's just the pavement. It's just a pair of shoes and different forms of dress depending on the time of year. And it's me mulling over some of the problems that I see in the world, and whether that's formulated as words, whether that's formulated as pictures, whether that's formulated as thoughts. I'm always thinking, and I'm not talking about things that I don't think about extensively, because otherwise I would feel like I'm being a fraud. That's not acceptable. So does everyone have one? Latch onto this if you think that it was just kind of normal that people, just kind of bad ideas around in their head. The ability to have an internal monologue is thought to develop during a childhood in what's called private speech. Okay, before I became like me, okay, which was probably somewhere around 18, 19 years old for hilarious reasons, but I was always a very contemplative, very quiet kid, shy in fact, you could say, but I would never say anything. And this was another just an absurd fact as well. I always thought that everybody thought about everything that they were saying and knew exactly what they were talking about before they put forth their idea on any topic that was out there, because that's what I'd do before I would even talk about video games that I really like, because at the time when I was growing up, big video gamer, okay, I wouldn't critique anything. I wouldn't talk about any topic in depth unless I'd thought about it a lot and was what I would consider to be an expert or an authority on the situation. But then when I started to realize that people just kind of run off at the mouth without really knowing any or really having any sort of fundamental or foundational knowledge on a topic. You can see that right now with Russia and Ukraine. A whole host of people with just a whole bunch of newfound geopolitical expertise right off the back of their epidemiological expertise as well. But they couldn't even point out Ukraine on a map, let alone understand the nuances and the complexity of the conflict. But that stunned me. That was one of those first things where it's like, wow, I guess maybe I'm a little different. Okay, maybe my thought process theoretically I could get away with a little bit more because I know a little bit about a lot of things. It's like, and again, I'm not just trying to hype myself up as being this all-knowing being. What I know could probably fit in a warehouse, but what I don't know could probably fit on a continent. But there's a lot of people who couldn't even fill up their thoughts in a closet. Case in point, in adulthood, the same type of inner speech continues to support working memory along with other types of cognitive processes. It's thought the internal monologue helps you complete everyday tasks such as your job. A lot of that's also automated though, but yeah, no, whenever you have a problem-solving event come through, it's like, okay, cool. That's why whenever I'm faced with something exceptionally difficult or something that requires a lot of thought, don't really talk it out. I just kind of do it, and I just kind of move in and out. I just take in the information that's required, process it, and then just figure out the most appropriate way, because I'm not trying to walk through and I'm not trying to talk through everything. Like people who lack an internal monologue have to do, they have to talk through every step of the process along the way because they don't have anywhere to just kind of put that information. This is bizarre to me, but it's a phenomenon that's huge. Still, not everyone experiences an inner voice. You might hear inner thoughts, and that doesn't pose the same type of inner speech as you can hear your own voice expressing them. It's also possible to have both an inner voice and inner thoughts when you experience them at intervals. Yeah, exactly. So, why do we have it? Internal monologue is thought to be partially controlled by the corollary discharge, a type of brain signal that helps to distinguish between different types of sensory experiences, such as those that are created internally or externally. Even if you don't necessarily hear an inner voice, everyone experiences corollary discharges to some degree. It's particularly relevant if you're an auditory system in the way you process hearing speech. Corollary discharge helps explain why your own voice sounds when you speak out loud, but it may sound different on a recording in another or to other people. That was one of the big hurdles when I first started this, well, actually my entire YouTube channels, whatever I want to call it. Editing stuff, like you don't sound like you on a recording. At least that's always the way that I found. Okay, I think that I sound more nasally and awful on recording than I do think that I sound in my head. But the way that I hear myself in the head is the way that I talk to myself in my head. Does that make sense? I hope so. I'm not crazy. Auditory hallucinations. What a segue. Hearing your own inner voice isn't itself harmful. It's just if you listen to it. But some forms of internal monologue can cause auditory hallucinations when you may believe you're hearing voices that aren't actually there. Auditory hallucinations are sometimes associated with certain mental health conditions, such as schizophrenia, as well as neurological conditions like Parkinson's disease. What, you shake and you keep trying to tell yourself not to shake, but you continue to? That's weird. Your inner voice may also have negative effects and primarily experience self-criticism on a regular basis, such as negative self-talk, and influence your overall mood and self-esteem. That's why you should probably move away from that. Anyways, so examples of internal monologue. See if this seems to fit, okay? The most common form of internal monologue is verbal, when you essentially talk to yourself. For example, you may talk to yourself about issues that are on your mind, or perhaps make internal lists of things that you'd like to accomplish. Yep, no, I experienced that on the regular. Inner speech can help support working memory. You also want to talk to yourself when you're preparing a speech or presentation, when you play what you're going to say in your mind ahead of time. Another example is replaying instructions in your mind. Yeah, just run it over, make sure that it sounds good, seems, if it makes sense. Like when I'm formulating these speeches, and if you guys see a cut or anything like that, or just weird somewhere in the middle of a sentence like that, I'm just trying to figure out the best way to continue on with the sentence, and I want to make sure that it kind of fits as best as it possibly can so that it doesn't sound clunky, but then I just play it in my head and I just talk it out that way. Does that make sense? Because if it doesn't, you might not have an internal monologue. Sucks to suck. Internal voices can also come in the form of having songs stuck in your head. Or perhaps you may replay a favorite movie or podcast in your mind. When you read a book, you might hear your own voice going over the words. Okay, literally every time that I read, I hear myself talking it out. Okay, I know that might sound weird, and that might, or maybe it's common for people that's out there. Again, I don't know people who don't have an internal monologue, but I don't know a lot of people, mostly by choice. I had to go to a crappy CBC article to find, well, the percentages out there that might freak you out, but they're citing Russell Hurlburt, by the way. He's kind of an expert on internal monologues, I guess. Psychology professor from the University of Nevada, has been studying what he calls the inner experience for more than 40 years. It's the most interesting topic on the planet, he says. He has a very high opinion of himself, I guess. He's written 6 books on it and has worked on hundreds of participants. He gives them each a beeper when it goes off at random times throughout the day, and he says he has a note what's going on in their minds. He said people generally think in 5 ways. Some people experience them all. Inner speaking, number 1, or an inner monologue, talking to yourself, hearing your voice or someone else, or audibly recalling a phone number. Number 2, inner seeing, visual imagery, thoughts with a visual symbol. Picturing a memory or a place you wish you lived. Yeah, it's kind of like an active daydreaming or something like that. Or if you're just trying to visualize a problem, you see an end goal and how you can work there using the different tools that are at your disposal. Rather, like, okay, you need to write and formulate a list. Well, what are you going to need in order to complete a list? Well, you're going to need a sheet of paper. You're going to need a pen. You're going to need a desk to write on. Where are you going to write it? Okay, what are you going to write on? You can see how that goes. You can just, instead of just laying everything out as words in your brain or just talking your way through it, you also visualize all those different pictures that are there as well. Feelings, a conscious experience of emotional process. Feeling sad after the death of a loved one. Okay, that's a way of thinking, I guess. Unsymbolized thinking, no word or image associated with thoughts. Pouring your morning coffee without telling yourself to. That's kind of like those automatic processes that your body just kind of automates, so you have fewer decisions to make throughout the day. Sensory awareness, paying attention to a sensory aspect of the environment for an unimportant reason. Hearing someone talk, but seeing the light reflecting off of their glasses. Yeah, I'm sure this guy probably experiences quite a bit. It's just when you're totally uninterested with this situation. If things have gone on for too long, the subject matter is dreadfully boring, or you're just anticipating something else happening in the future. But here's the dagger. According to Hurlburt, not too many people have an inner monologue 100% of the time, but most do sometimes. He estimates that inner monologue is a frequent thing for 30 to 50% of people. The guy who is theoretically about the expert in this field, half of the people that he has seen, thousands of participants, half of the people have an internal monologue. And that, at least to me, explains why the majority of people, okay? And you know what? Hey, if you're watching this, at least the conclusion, I'd probably put you in, not in this group, but that explains why the general population is so brain dead, because they literally don't have any thoughts running through their head. You understand this? It explains quite a bit while so many people are so easy to just lead around by the noses because they don't have the processes that just figure things out by themselves. It's a weird phenomenon. It's something that has bothered me for a while, but just seeing it in writing, or as close to writing as this is, really just kind of crystallizes the common state of the world. Hopefully you found that just as fascinating as I did, because, like I said, it explains a lot. It really does. With that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. Why don't you follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.